I always believed that love was a sanctuary, a safe space where hearts could rest and souls could flourish in the warmth of trust and shared dreams. For years, I built my world around that belief. My name is Samantha, and I once thought that the life I shared with Jason was the epitome of happiness. We met in college, fell in love over late-night coffee conversations, and promised each other that we would always be there for one another. In those early days, every smile, every tender touch, and every whispered promise felt like a pledge to an unbreakable bond. Our wedding day was filled with hope, and for a long time, our home overflowed with laughter, shared memories, and a sense of belonging that I cherished above all else. But as time passed, small things began to change. At first, they were almost imperceptible. The way Jason's smile seemed to fade just a little when he thought I wasn't watching, the subtle shift in the tone of his voice when I asked about his day. I chalked these moments up to the pressures of work, the monotony of everyday life, and the natural evolution of a long-term relationship. Still, deep inside, I felt an undercurrent of uncertainty that I tried hard to ignore. I began to notice little details, a scent on his shirt that wasn't mine, a delay in his replies to my texts, and the way his eyes sometimes wandered as if searching for something beyond our little world. I remember one autumn evening as vividly as if it were yesterday. The sky was a wash of gray, and a chill had settled over our quiet, suburban home. Jason had mentioned he needed to work late, a phrase he'd used far too often in recent months. I sat in our living room, the only sound the steady tick of the clock on the wall, and felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I tried to convince myself that it was simply the way busy lives sometimes unfolded, that I was being unfair in expecting perfection. But as the hours slipped by and Jason still hadn't returned, the worry grew into a persistent throb of anxiety. I began to document these oddities in a small leather-bound journal, noting every unusual detail of our daily life. Each entry was a mixture of love and doubt, a silent battle between the desire to trust and the fear of betrayal. I would write about his late returns, his hushed phone calls in the other room, and even the way his eyes shined with something I couldn't quite name when he thought I wasn't looking. I was careful not to let suspicion darken the memory of all the good times we'd shared, but with every unanswered question, the possibility of a hidden truth began to loom larger in my mind. Nights became restless. I would lie in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, my thoughts churning in a storm of confusion. I remembered how Jason used to hold my hand as we drifted off to sleep, how his gentle presence had once been the source of all my comfort. Now, however, I felt a deep loneliness creeping into those moments of supposed togetherness. The laughter we once shared had been replaced by silence heavy with unspoken words, and I couldn't help but wonder if something had irrevocably changed between us. One night, as the wind howled outside and the rain began to tap a mournful rhythm against the window, I made a decision. I realized that if I continued to let uncertainty gnaw at my soul, I would lose myself entirely. I had to know the truth, even if it meant confronting the worst possible scenario. The idea was terrifying, but I told myself that silence and inaction were no longer options. I needed clarity, and sometimes clarity came at the cost of pain. That decision set in motion a plan that felt both desperate and strangely determined. I decided that on one of those long nights when Jason would be away, when he claimed to be working late, I would stay behind and quietly observe. I would gather the evidence of whatever secret he might be keeping, even if the act of watching felt like a betrayal of the trust one had so deeply valued. I rationalized it by telling myself that I was protecting our love by ensuring that it was based on honesty and truth. But deep down, I feared the moment I might uncover something irreversible. I spent the following days in a state of anxious anticipation. Every ticking second on the clock felt like a countdown to a moment that could shatter my world. I combed through every memory, every interaction we'd ever had, searching for hints that might explain this creeping sense of disquiet. And though I clung to the hope that my suspicions were unfounded, the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong refused to be silenced. In those hours of solitude, I realized that I was standing at the crossroads of two vastly different futures, one in which the love I'd built with Jason remained intact, and another where betrayal lurked in the shadows, waiting to unravel the fabric of my existence. I knew that the coming night would be the turning point. With a heavy heart and trembling resolve, I prepared myself for what might come. I did not know if I was about to confirm my worst fears or simply dispel them once and for all, but I understood that the risk was one I had to take. As dusk fell and the world outside grew dim, I sat quietly in our bedroom. Every creak of the floor, every sigh of the wind, set my nerves on edge. I told myself that I was doing this for the sake of our future, to protect the love that had once been so pure. With a final deep breath, I resolved to wait, hidden in the shadows, ready to face whatever truth lay ahead that night. When the hours stretched long and the darkness seemed to envelope every corner of our home, I put my plan into action. Jason had told me he was working late again, a routine excuse that, in recent weeks, had grown increasingly suspect. I sat on the edge of our bed with my journal clutched in my hands, my heart pounding in time with the rhythmic ticking of the clock. I knew that if I was to uncover the truth, I needed to be vigilant and quiet. After a few minutes that felt like an eternity, I mustered the courage to slip out of the room. I moved silently through the hallway until I reached the master bedroom, a room that had once been our sanctuary but now felt like the stage of a drama I never wished to witness. With trembling hands, I knelt by the foot of the bed and eased myself into the small gap beneath it. The space was tight and musty, and I pressed myself against the cold wood, trying to stifle my ragged breathing. Every sound above, the soft rustle of fabric, the distant hum of a television, even my own heartbeat, seemed amplified in the oppressive silence. Time slowed as I lay there, hidden and listening. I clung to the hope that I would find nothing amiss, that perhaps my fears were unfounded. But as the minutes ticked by, a faint sound reached my ears, a low murmur, hushed and tender, coming from the bedroom above. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to make sense of the sounds. It wasn't the usual quiet of an empty house. There was a rhythm to those whispers, a cadence that spoke of intimacy and closeness. I strained to listen, my heart hammering in my chest. The voices grew clearer, a blend of Jason's familiar tone and a soft, alluring feminine voice. I could barely decipher the words, but the emotion behind them was unmistakable. Tenderness, passion, and something that felt forbidden. I felt as if I were witnessing a secret performance, one in which every gesture and whispered syllable spelled out betrayal. The shock of it struck me like a physical blow, and I felt the world narrow to that singular, excruciating moment. Cautiously, I inched my head forward, peering through the narrow gap under the bed. The sight that met my eyes was both surreal and devastating. There, in the dim light of our bedroom lamp, was Jason, his face relaxed in a way I had never seen before, his eyes closed in a moment of quiet indulgence. And beside him, a woman I did not recognize, her presence as undeniable as the softness in her voice. They were wrapped in each other's arms in a way that transcended mere physical contact. It was as if their entire beings were intertwined in a secret language of desire. I fought back a cry, stifling it against the oppressive weight of shock and sorrow. I could see subtle gestures, the brush of a hand, the slight tilt of a head, the way their bodies moved in silent harmony. It was a scene of intimacy that defied description, a quiet, almost ritualistic merging of souls, where every touch conveyed volumes of unspoken emotion. I felt betrayed not only by the act itself, but by the erosion of the trust and history we had once shared. The room above, which had once been our safe haven, had now transformed into a stage for deception. Every detail burned into my memory. I observed how the soft glow of the lamp illuminated their features, a mixture of longing and guilt on Jason's face, the serene confidence in the woman's eyes. I could not discern the full nature of their encounter. The details remained cloaked in a quiet privacy that left much to the imagination. Even as I absorbed the sight, my mind raced with questions and heartache. How had our love, once so steadfast, come to this? What had I missed in the signs, and how deep did his betrayal run? Hidden in the darkness, I felt a torrent of conflicting emotions surge within me: anger, despair, and an unbearable sadness. I realized that the intimacy I had once craved, the shared connection that had filled our nights with laughter and hope, was now tainted by a secret that threatened to dismantle everything I held dear. My heart ached with the realization that the person I had trusted most was leading a double life, one where love and desire were directed elsewhere. In that moment, time stood still. I clung to every detail as if to commit it to memory, a memory that would haunt me for days to come. I wished I could disappear into the shadows permanently, to erase the pain of what I had just witnessed. But even as I lay there, the truth seared into my consciousness. I felt a fragile resolve begin to form. I knew that hiding would not heal me. I would have to confront this reality, however painful it might be. With a final, agonizing moment of silent observation, I retreated back into the safety of darkness beneath the bed. My hands trembled as I slowly rose, every step weighted with sorrow and determination. I emerged from my hiding place with a heart shattered by the clarity of what I had seen, yet with the knowledge that I must face Jason and the unraveling of our shared life. The secret now lay bare before me, a secret that demanded confrontation, understanding, and ultimately, a choice about the future of my own life. The following morning dawned gray and heavy with the aftermath of the night before. I awoke with tears staining my pillow and a numbness that made every movement feel surreal. The images of Jason and the stranger, of that quiet, forbidden intimacy, remained etched in my mind. I knew that today would be the day I could no longer ignore the truth that had infiltrated every corner of my heart. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, my hands wrapped tightly around the ceramic mug as if seeking solace in its warmth. Every clink of cutlery, every rustle of paper, was a harsh reminder of the life I had thought was mine. The silence of the house was oppressive, and I knew that soon I would have to confront the man responsible for this deep betrayal. I spent the hours before Jason's return lost in my thoughts, replaying every moment, every whispered word I had overheard. I searched desperately for a sign that my suspicions were unfounded, but all evidence pointed to the undeniable truth of his deception. When Jason finally arrived home, his footsteps seemed to echo in the hallways as he entered our living room without the usual greeting, as if burdened by an unspoken weight. I rose from my seat, heart pounding, and met his gaze in the dim light. There was a moment of suspended silence, a fragile pause in which every unspoken question hung between us like a dense fog. My voice trembled as I finally spoke. "Jason, I know what I saw last night." The words were soft, yet they carried the full force of my shattered heart. Jason's face drained of color. For a long moment, he did not respond, his eyes searching mine for an answer, or perhaps for a trace of forgiveness that was no longer there. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and choked with regret. He admitted, with barely concealed sorrow, that he had been unfaithful for several months. He told me that the affair had begun gradually, a series of seemingly harmless interactions that escalated into a relationship built on secrecy and desire. Even as he offered a series of explanations, every word felt like a dagger twisting in my chest. The conversation that followed was a torrent of raw emotion. I wept uncontrollably as I demanded to know why. The countless memories of our shared laughter, the promises of forever, all seemed to crumble before my eyes. Jason tried to explain, his voice laced with regret and confusion, but his words were insufficient to heal the gaping wound his betrayal had inflicted. The intimacy I once shared with him had become a painful reminder of a trust that was now irrevocably broken. In that fraught moment, I felt as if I were suspended between two worlds, the one we had built together and a dark, uncertain future where betrayal reigned. I recalled the quiet intimacy of that night, not only the one I had witnessed, but the tender moments we had once shared, moments that now felt like relics of a life that had ceased to exist. My heart ached as I realized that I could no longer live in the shadow of that secret. I demanded honesty, demanding that he face the consequences of his choices. I told him that I needed time to process the devastation of what I had seen, that the love I once knew was now tarnished beyond repair. For hours we sat in that heavy silence, the air thick with remorse and unspoken apologies. I could see the regret in his eyes, a sorrow so deep it was almost palpable. Yet I also saw a reflection of my own pain, a mirror image of a love lost and a future uncertain. I knew that no matter what he said, I would have to find a way to heal and rebuild my sense of self. The conversation ended with no neat resolution, only the somber acknowledgement that our lives would never be the same. After Jason left for a day to give me space, I remained alone with my thoughts, trying to make sense of the shattered fragments of my heart. I knew that the road ahead would be long and painful, a journey through the remnants of trust and the daunting task of reclaiming my identity. The betrayal had cut me deeply, but within the depths of that sorrow, I sensed the faint stirrings of a new resolve, a determination to seek truth and, eventually, to find peace. In that moment of solitude, I vowed that I would not let this betrayal define me. I would learn to trust again, not necessarily in Jason, but in myself and in the possibility of a future built on genuine, unguarded love. In the weeks that followed, I embarked on the arduous journey of healing, a journey marked by moments of intense sorrow, quiet resilience, and the gradual rediscovery of my own strength. I began by packing away the remnants of the past, photographs that once held joyful memories, letters filled with promises of forever, and even the small mementos that now served as painful reminders of what had been lost. Each act of letting go felt like a small victory against the tide of betrayal that had threatened to drown me. I sought solace in long, solitary walks through the park, where the gentle rustle of autumn leaves and the soft murmur of nature offered a quiet counterpoint to the storm within my heart. I found comfort in reading and in writing, pouring my emotions into a journal where every page was a testament to both my grief and my determination to rise again. There were days when the pain seemed unbearable, when the memory of Jason's deceit would surge unexpectedly, leaving me breathless and disoriented. Yet even on those darkest days, I clung to the hope that healing was possible, that I could rebuild my life piece by piece. During this period of introspection, I began to rediscover parts of myself that I had long forgotten. I reconnected with old friends who welcomed me with open arms and gentle smiles, their presence reminding me that I was not defined solely by the betrayal I had endured. Slowly, I allowed myself to dream again, to imagine a future in which my worth was not measured by another's actions, but by the strength I found within. In time, I even dared to consider the possibility of new love, a quiet, unassuming connection that did not demand grand declarations, but rather grew from mutual respect, understanding, and tenderness. One evening, as twilight descended and the sky blushed with the soft hues of dusk, I met Daniel once more. His presence had become a gentle constant in my life, a reassuring reminder that kindness could heal even the deepest wounds. That night, as we sat on a quiet balcony overlooking the city, our conversation meandered from trivialities to the raw truths of our hearts. In the gentle embrace of that evening, a quiet intimacy blossomed between us, a subtle yet powerful connection that neither needed to label with explicit words. Our closeness was marked by soft glances, gentle touches, and the kind of silence that spoke of mutual understanding. There was a delicate merging of souls, a moment of connection that, without graphic detail, affirmed that even in the aftermath of betrayal, the heart is capable of tender renewal. In the weeks and months that followed, I worked to rebuild my sense of self and to define my own future. I continued to explore the world around me with cautious optimism, finding joy in small, everyday moments, a shared laugh with a friend, a quiet evening reading by the window, the first blooms of spring that reminded me of nature's unyielding resilience. Each day, I learned to cherish my own company and to nurture the parts of me that had lain dormant for too long. I embraced a newfound independence, recognizing that the strength to heal and to love again had always resided within me. Now, as I stand at the threshold of a future unburdened by the painful shadows of the past, I carry with me the lessons learned from that fateful night beneath our bed and the subsequent unraveling of our shared life. I have learned that betrayal, as devastating as it may be, can also be the catalyst for profound personal growth. I have discovered that true intimacy is not defined solely by physical connection but by the quiet, steadfast presence of someone who listens and understands. Though the memory of that shocking revelation will always be a part of me, it no longer dictates my worth or my future. I now face each new day with a heart that is cautious yet open, a heart that has weathered the storms of betrayal and emerged resilient, determined to seek out joy, authenticity, and a love that is honest and unguarded. My journey has taught me that healing is neither linear nor swift. It is a winding path marked by moments of sorrow, reflection, and ultimately, renewal. And as I continue forward, I choose to celebrate every small victory, a smile shared with a friend, the comforting warmth of the morning sun, and the gentle reminder that even in the quiet aftermath of heartbreak, hope can blossom anew. This is my story, one of pain and loss, but also one of resilience and the slow, steady return to life. I share in the hope that anyone who has experienced betrayal may find solace in the truth that even shattered hearts can mend. Every day, I remind myself that I am worthy of love, that I deserve to be cherished, and that the future holds the promise of gentle, genuine intimacy built not on secrets, but on truth and compassion. And so, with each new dawn, I step forward, embracing the beauty of my own rebirth, confident that my heart will continue to beat with the strength of a love rediscovered. I thought the worst had already happened. I thought I had already crossed the point of no return the moment I let this go too far, the moment I made choices I could never undo. But the real disaster wasn't when my husband found out. It wasn't even when he walked away, saying nothing. No, the real collapse came later, when I was alone for days. I told myself I had won. That this was what I wanted all along. That the guilt I had tried so hard to push away would eventually fade, leaving only the thrill of what I had done. But the silence was suffocating. The house felt different. The spaces that had once been filled with routine, our morning coffees, the sound of his voice calling my name, the feeling of belonging, were now just echoes of something I had destroyed. At first, I convinced myself it didn't matter, that he would move on, and so would I. But then the waiting began. I expected him to call, to text, to scream, to demand answers, to fight. I expected a confrontation, an explosion. I braced myself for it, rehearsing all the ways I could defend what I had done, convince him that I had no regrets, that I had made the right choice, but nothing came, and that was worst, because it meant he had truly let go. Matthew stayed. He didn't talk about it, didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't ask if I regretted anything. Maybe because he knew the answer. Maybe because we had never needed words to understand each other before, and this was no different, but something had changed now that we were no longer hiding, now that there was no thrill of secrecy. The weight of what we had done settled in. And Matthew, for all his confidence, for all the strength I had once admired in him, looked at me differently now, like he wasn't sure if he had won me, or if he had just lost himself. Days turned into weeks. Caleb never reached out. I saw his absence in everything. The empty closet, the untouched side of the bed, the way the house felt too big, too quiet. He had erased himself from this space so easily, as if he had never been a part of it at all, and maybe that was what I deserved, and I tried to move forward. To remind myself that this was what I had wanted. That I had chosen this, but the nights were long, and in the silence, I started to wonder, had I really chosen Matthew? Or had I just been running from something? I had spent so long chasing the feeling of power, of control, of knowing that I could make someone break. And Matthew had broken. I had watched him lose the battle against himself, had watched him cross the line he swore he never would, but now, I was starting to see something I hadn't before. Breaking someone wasn't the same as owning them, and the truth was, I wasn't sure if Matthew truly belonged to me. Or, if he ever had. One evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table when Matthew came home. He looked exhausted. He had been working late more often, staying out longer, saying less. At first, I assumed it was stress, but tonight was different. He hesitated before sitting down across from me, rubbing a hand down his face. The silence stretched between us, uncomfortable. And then, finally, he spoke. I saw Caleb today. Something inside me froze. I hadn't heard his name in weeks. Hadn't let myself say it. Hadn't let myself think it too much, but now, it was there. I forced my voice to stay even. Where? Matthew exhaled. Downtown. He didn't see me. A pause. Then, he looked okay. I wasn't sure what to do with that. I had convinced myself that Caleb was hurting, that he was broken, that he was somewhere, replaying everything, struggling to move forward without me, but Matthew wouldn't have said it unless he meant it. Caleb wasn't waiting for me. He wasn't coming back. I nodded slowly, staring at the table, tracing invisible patterns into the wood. Good, I murmured. But it didn't sound like I meant it. Matthew studied me for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair. I need to ask you something, he said, and I looked up. What? He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. Did you ever really want me? The question landed like a punch to the stomach, and I opened my mouth. Then closed it because of course I had wanted him. I had chased him, tested him, made him break. I had chosen him, hadn't I? I thought about the way it had felt, how thrilling it had been to know I could get him to lose control. The rush of winning. The power of knowing I could make someone like him give in, but now, with Caleb gone and the game over, I was starting to realize something. I had never wanted Matthew. I had wanted the power, the feeling of being the one who could undo him, and now that I had, now that we had ruined everything, I wasn't sure what was left that night. I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. His breathing was steady, slow. I used to love the way he made me feel wanted, the way he had tried so hard to resist before he finally gave in, but now, in the aftermath, I felt nothing, and I knew this wasn't love. IT had never been loved. I had spent so long running from something, maybe from Caleb, maybe from myself, that I had mistaken the thrill of destruction for something real, but all I had done was burn everything down, and now, all that was left was the ashes. The next morning, I packed a bag. Matthew watched from the doorway. Saying nothing when I reached for the door, he finally spoke. Where will you go? I didn't look at him. I don't know. I expected him to stop me, to fight, to care, but he didn't, because we both knew the truth. This had never been meant to last. I left without looking back. I didn't know where I was going, didn't know what came next, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing anything, and maybe, just maybe, that was a start.